Boys and girls, today we're going on a field trip. A field trip to visit an art teacher and an artist whose name is Camilla Spadafino. Camilla is a painter. She creates amazing portraits of people in her neighborhood and pets, which she titles Miss Camilla's Neighborhood. We're going to learn all about her process of creating these realistic and very symbolic portraits of friends in her neighborhood. So let's go on a field trip, guys.
Hello, I am Camilla Spadafino. I want to welcome you to my art studio. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my neighborhood portrait series, Miss Camilla's Neighborhood. I'm going to show you how to create a portrait. This is an example of a dog portrait that I did that tells the dog's story and his dream for his future. I will be walking you through the steps of drawing and painting and planning out your project. I'm going to show you what we're making. It starts with this. This is the end when it's all produced in a coloring book. So here are some of the pages in the coloring book. And I'm going to show you how to make them. And then you can make your own coloring books if you want to.
Awesome.
And your own coloring pages.
Yay!
So, each of them starts as an acrylic painting on a canvas, just like this. And this tells the story of this dog.
Look at the drawings in the background behind the dog. This dog likes peanut butter, walks, bones, chasing balls, being in nature. His dream for his future is to be free of his leash, outdoors, running free in the sunshine.
So the way that you make this is, I use transfer paper, which is graphite paper, and it's really important to get graphite paper because some transfer paper doesn't erase, and you want to be able to erase these lines. So it's like a graphite pencil. You can also make your own transfer paper by taking an image like this, or a photograph, any kind of image that you want, and just with your regular pencil, I show my students how to do this on their own. You color the back of it really dark and heavy, and use cross hatching so that you get it really dark and heavy.
That means she's got some lines going up and down vertically and then some lines going horizontally.
Yeah, so back and forth like this. But you want it to be really dark like this because that's how the transfer paper is really. And then you lay your artwork down and you take a ballpoint pen, which I have one in there somewhere, and then you go over your lines like this. That's how you make the transfer paper. And that's the first step in the process, and so I have one set up for you right now to show you how I do that with a photograph. So you have to tape your transfer paper down.
There's the transfer paper, right?
The black paper, the graphite paper. So I tape it down because you don't want it to wiggle at all, because it'll really mess you up. And then I have to tape it down here as well, very carefully. When you do it on your own paper, you just put a piece of tape at the top and then lay it onto your canvas like this. And just fold it over a little bit and a little piece of tape down here so it doesn't wiggle around. I'm going to demonstrate how to go over the photo or whatever image with the transfer paper underneath. So you just really want to be cautious that you're not skipping any area. So you pick a place to start and you want to go over it pretty slowly. Now I'm ignoring this part of the drawing because I photoshopped that and I don't want it to be in the finished piece. You don't have to trace every line. In fact, you don't want to trace every line. I think about where lines are coming together, like around the ear and the side of the face, and I'm going to leave that in without a line. And then just part of the chin and part of the face. You don't have to do everything, and it's more of a sketchy line once you get in the flow of it. I'm just going to do that carefully. The eyes are the most important part of a portrait. The eyes really capture people, so you want to really concentrate It helps to be very, very quiet while you do this, is you really want to be thinking about the shapes that you see and the lines that you're making, and to focus very deeply, especially when you get to the eyes. It's important when you tape this down to think about how you can check it as you go. So you have like a little escape hatch here is what I think of it is, so that I can look back into the drawing and see how it's going. Let's peek in there and see. That's the basics, and there's some things on here that I will need to fix. The teeth, the eyes, and everything. When you first take it off, and you have the graphite drawing underneath, it is not finished. The next step, you are going to go back in on top of those pencil lines that you made, and you're going to create a lot of line variety. Some thin line, some thick line, and you're going to keep looking back at the photograph, because tracing is not the last step. You have to go back in and draw and really focus on how you see things again. You don't have to draw every line that you made. Sometimes it's just a hint at a line. Around the corners of things, that's where I think where things are happening. I make the line a little bit darker. And then here, I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. And there again in the corners, that's where things are happening. I make the line a little bit thicker, and around here on the eye, then I sometimes won't even draw, or I'll barely draw that very thin line in, but here's the corner where I usually start working at the corners first to sort of bring out the shape, and it's like you're hinting at shapes. You're not literally going over every single line. So I think this eye is starting to look more like his eye than when I trace it. The tracing is just to help you get the placing more now. And then again, like just to emphasize how important it is to create line variety and to make lines where things are happening. Around the side of his face is also where something is happening, because you have two things coming together. And where you have two faces coming together, that line will be very thick, because you want to have a lot of contrast in line. This project is about symbols, which are largely shapes, and it's also about line and line variety, having lots of it. Thin line and thick line especially. Sometimes I even tell my students to think of turning your lines into shapes, so you can see how that is becoming very shape-like. There's a lot happening there where the chin and the neck and the shirt come together, and another person's face also is coming together there. So I really put magical thoughts in my head about what I'm creating and the people that I'm working on. I radiate lots and lots of love to them. I think about all the symbols that are going to be in their background. I think about this family and their dream for the future, and I just infuse that good energy into it. And I really think that helps me to start thinking magically about how I'm making the lines. This gentleman, I created his underdrawing with the graphite paper, like I showed you a minute ago, and have worked on it for a while, bringing out variety of line. Again, the thicker line around where things are happening, and then thinner line in his hair, and some thicker line and thinner line in his shirt. I could go back into that more, and I will later after I've painted it. So for now, I'm going to show you how I create the background. I think of the background as wallpaper strips. So again, these are wallpaper strips is what I call them, where I have the symbols in them and the dream for the person or the animal's future. And I have to plan that out a little bit. I don't want to have any straight lines here. I like the background to be more organic and expressive. So I do this by hand without pencil drawing underneath. I go straight in with my Sharpie marker. I try to tell about 4 or 5 things about each person and then their dream for the future. So I like to have between 4 and 6 wallpaper strips in the background. And I think about, I kind of draw it with my finger first and think that looks about right. And then I just jump into it and I really don't worry about it being completely straight. Then I think about, would this look better to have a thin line here, or do I want some overlap? And overlapping shapes is important. So I don't want to cut something off right beside his face like that, because I wouldn't be able to get little symbols in next to it. So I think this looks pretty good right here. I also wrap my edges. A gallery owner told me this one time. If you're going to be selling your artwork in a gallery, it's good to go around the edges because it looks more finished and professional. And then people can choose whether or not they're going to put it in a frame. And I love how it looks when it goes around the edges. All right, so I'm going to continue on with that. Sometimes I'll just throw in a little thin one, because I like to add little polka dots or lines, or just sometimes leave a space for color. So there's one. All right. That looks pretty good to me. This will be, let me double check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 main storytelling areas. So I'll have 5 things that this person identifies with their personality, things that they like to do, and then I'll leave 1 strip to help tell their story. After I've set up my spaces like that, then I go back in and I create more line variety. When I'm working with a client, I ask them to tell me 5 things about the person that I'm going to be painting. What their hobbies and interests are, what they like to do. If they have symbols already in mind, then they can tell me that. A lot of times I go and create the symbols. Some of my portraits are more about floral patterns. I reference a lot of different fabric. That was from a fabric that I liked. This person likes to garden. That was her main thing. So she loved, these were her favorite vegetables, peas and carrots and black-eyed peas. And she also liked to but she also liked to plant flowers. This was the custodian at Lockland, and his first name is Leo, and so he associates with the lion, and I think of him as being the king of Lockland, so I put a crown on the lion's head. He also liked to play the lottery, so I put $signs here, and those are his lucky numbers. And he's filled with love, and he's always helping people, so those are his helping hands. With the painting, I like to use paint straight out of the tube or the container. And the reason for that is because I planned and have done so many of these. I wanted them to have continuity. We could call that branding. I want people to look at my neighborhood portraits and to know that Camilla Spadafino did those. And the best way that I knew to do that was to create consistency by using paint right out of the tube. So that I didn't have to mix it. I could always count on it being true to that color. But before I do that, I want to show you again like how important it is to clean up. This paint is dry, that's why I can't erase with it right now. And get as many of those lines out as you can. Some of these lines are being a little stubborn, but they're really good, rough with it. It's okay if you can't get every single line out that you did with the transfer paper or the pencil, because you're going to paint over it, and most of them will disappear. But this paint still has some translucency. And I take my paint right out of the tube because I don't want to waste any on a palette. You want to take your time, and I leave lines when I can, and some of them get painted over. And you can see how when I'm painting over, you can still see the lines underneath. That really helps me because, like we've been talking about, some of the lines I want to barely show, and other of the lines I want to bring out more. And when I paint over them, it helps take some of those lines away again. Now, because this paint is so translucent, there's a lot of variation in the way the paint looks. It's not done until sometimes I've done 3 layers of paint. So I'm going to go back over this man so you can see how much better it looks as I build up the layers. And it is 1 layer at a time, so this takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of time. It takes me 8 to 10 hours to create one 8x10 painting. Wow. Because of that, the building the layers of paint and the high level of detail, because you can see how tiny some of those spaces are, and getting in and painting that detail and making it all look really clean, because craftsmanship is, for me, a really important part of this work. I like it to look really crisp, like a coloring page looks really crisp. And so I like the paintings when they're finished to also have that high level of detail and craftsmanship. Once I have paint on my paintbrush, I try to find a way to use it somewhere else in the painting so that I conserve my paint and take really good care of my materials that way. So that I'm just going to go into her while I have paint on there. I don't want to waste it.
Once Miss Camilla is finished painting the portrait, she begins to painstakingly paint the background. Look how small all of those beautiful detailed lines and images are. It takes her a long time to paint those details, but she does them well and with good craftsmanship.
How long have you been doing this style of art?
The neighborhood portrait series, I guess I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. It actually came about when I was teaching my students Red Grooms, and we were watching an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Was Red Grooms on there?
Yeah, because sometimes Mr. Rogers has done like what you're doing, visiting artists in their studios.
That's right.
And so Mr. Rogers visited Red Grooms, who's a Nashville artist. And Red Grooms had painted an image of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I thought, oh, I want to do that for all the people that I know. You know, I get those big ideas. Yes. So I had imagined it like hundreds of these with the coloring sheet on the wall next to the painting. And that people would come in and they would just be ripping off the coloring sheets and running over to the table, and everyone would be coloring and pulling down coloring sheets, and it would just be this huge like celebration of people.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
And how unique everybody is. Yeah, I've been working on it for a while.
And how many have you done, and how many neighborhood portraits have you done?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I have not kept up a tally sheet of them. I guess maybe 100.
Wow.
And so you think about that, it's not as like I wanted to do several hundred.
But it's time consuming.
So if I have done 100, that's 800 hours.
A little bit of time.
I hope you had as much fun as I did taking this field trip to the studio and home of Camilla Spadafino, amazing artist and wonderful art teacher. How fabulous was she at explaining to us how she goes about creating her Miss Camilla's neighborhood portraits. Thank you so much, Miss Camilla, for having us in your beautiful home and your studio. Happy creating!